Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Defenders Live. I'm your host, Lora Thorson. John Hearne is the founder of Two Pillars Training and a longtime federal law enforcement professional with decades of experience studying violence, criminal behavior, and human performance under stress. His background spans street-level enforcement, prosecution support, and deep research into crime data. John is known for cutting through popular narratives and grounding his work in hard evidence. Tonight, we're separating myth from reality. We're going to talk about how criminals actually think, where the data gets misunderstood, and what the system does and does not reliably do to protect you. Stay tuned to learn how to make smarter decisions about your personal safety and focus your energy where it actually matters. Before we get started, make sure you're subscribed, whether you're watching on Rumble or YouTube or listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else you find this show. If you don't want to miss another episode, head to defenders-live.com and become a free subscriber. That way, every new episode gets delivered straight to your inbox. And if you're looking for top-tier firearms and self-defense training, go to defenders-usa.com and check the calendar to see what's coming to your area this year. Hey, John. Yay! Where's the confetti? We need confetti or something. We were joking. We were joking before the show that we were going to play music and you were going to come in from the background and it was going to be this whole thing, but you didn't do it. Why,
That's
John?
flashing lights. Look at that.
Oh yeah, strobe lights. We need something to hype up tonight because I'm tired. So I told you earlier, if you need to crack a couple jokes, then that's fine with me. All right, so let's begin at the beginning here. I want to set the tone with this lead-in question. So you are one of the coolest, geekiest, nerdiest, and I say that in an endearing way, guys, I've ever met. And I always enjoy when you come back on the show because you have so much good information for people. And you have spent decades studying real-world crime patterns. So when you look at what's going on today, where do you see the biggest gaps between perception and reality? And do you think that that gap has gotten wider in recent years?
No. First off, thank you for the kind introduction. I
Yeah.
do seem to be a lot of people's favorite repository for worthless knowledge. So, um, everybody feels their niche in the industry as far as it goes, and I'm very well acquainted with what mine is. So,
Yeah, you know what your role is, that's for sure.
Your question about, I guess, reality mismatch, I guess would be the big one.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the problem we have is in answering that question is we can no longer effectively rely on the big sources of crime data.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the FBI got kind of caught with its hand in the cookie jar, where during the past administration, they reported crime numbers that showed a dramatic reduction in crime under the Biden administration. And
Mm-hmm.
then very quietly the next year, they realized that those numbers were wrong. And it wasn't that crime had gone down at a slightly less number than under the Biden administration. There was a net increase of about 6% in violent crime. So
Mm-hmm.
the FBI never let anybody knew that was going on. What we're also seeing now are several scandals around the country. Probably the best example is Washington, D.C. got caught cooking their books as far as that goes. D.C. has always been a significant problem for violent crime, always one of the top metro areas. And their latest police chief was just flat out faking stuff. So it's very common in large urban areas for the police to respond with ambulance calls, to assist with EMS, stuff like that. And a lot of crimes were when the officers were clearing a scene, they would simply, notate it as a transport, to the hospital by EMS. What they were completely skipping over is why that person was being transported by EMS. And typically that would be a gunshot wound. It would be, unconsciousness from an aggravated assault.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of came up with their own definitions that didn't match up the FBI statistics.
Mm-hmm.
So we seem to be seeing that going around all around the countries in the areas that, of course, have the worst crime problems. So now when people try to evaluate their relative risks, there just really is a dearth of information to help people make those decisions. So that's would be the I guess one of the big misconceptions you have is that you can't trust what the FBI says as far as crime numbers. Maybe trends, but even that's suspect. You recently listened to the presentation that I did. If you want to know what the actual levels of crime are in this country, you would be well positioned to take the numbers reported by the FBI, multiply that by 5, and you're still going to be a little bit short on the actual levels of crime. What we're seeing are national trends in which a lot of people are no longer reporting crimes to the police. There's a
Mm.
bunch of societal circumstances that lead to that. Excessive times, to call 911. A lot of times, like property crime, simple assaults, you're going to be told to call the police station to make a report. You're never actually going to talk to an officer. So people
Mm.
just have stopped reporting the crime. I
Mm.
always like to look at John Lott for his stuff. He's thinking that the trends have been for crime to be continuing up as far as that goes. Now, the last numbers for the last year were absolutely amazing. Homicides were down dramatically. The thing that stood out to me for the most recent data we have is that felonious line of duty deaths and police officers are at an all-time low. They have never been this low. Now
Mm.
we can, debate about what that is, and quite frankly, I don't know if we have good answers for what's driven that down so low. But the average person can't trust the big data sources, especially the FBI numbers, because they have become such a political hot potato. So
Mhm.
that'll be the other one of the big mismatches I have. The other one that I think that people don't understand is how to properly assess risk. So whenever you're assessing risk, you want to include not just the likelihood that something's going to happen, the likelihood of being victimized.
Oh, yeah,
Maybe
you had a
say,
graph. I remember the graph in your presentation.
yeah, the odds of being victimized in any given year are probably fairly low. The problem is when you carry that over a lifetime of potential risk, that number starts to get a lot bigger. So when we don't just look at how frequently something happens, we also have to look at the potential circumstances that come from that. I'm famous for having coined the phrase, "It's not the odds, it's the stakes,"
Mm.
and I am hard pressed to come up with any particular demographic that should not have some concerns about violent crime. When we look at how you actually, measure risk, there's this 5 by 5 matrix that tries to balance the odds of something happening with the consequences. Um,
Mhm.
Nobody has such a low risk for violent crime. I don't care how rural and remote you are, that you should not at least have some degree of situational awareness and some kind of pre-planned responses to those kind of circumstances. And for most of it, violent crime is always on the table as far as that goes. So um, when you combine that with just a general degradation in police services, extended response times, shorter staffing, the cops you are going to have showing up on your scene are not the same cops that showed up 10 years ago. I retired. Anybody that could retire is largely punched out as far as this stuff goes. So you have this circumstance where you have your field training officers are, maybe have 2 or 3 years on the job. They're training guys just out of the academy who were kind of scraping bottom of the barrel to begin with, and none of those officers have ever dealt in a world where proactive policing was a thing. So when you combine all those factors together, there really are no neat answers to assessing your individual risk, but it's never zero. The thing
Right.
everybody says, well, the odds of me needing a gun are 1 in a million, and I'm like, dude, I can't give you an exact number because criminal risk is very personal, but the odds are not 1 in a million.
Yeah. Yeah, and burying your head in the sand and thinking it'll never happen to me is not the way to live life. It doesn't matter what category it is, you know? Yeah,
What
definitely.
was the line? Fat, dumb, and stupid is no way to go through life.
Yeah, exactly. Especially nowadays. I mean, I thought it was interesting where you let off with, we don't know if the information is correct. In fact, it's probably not, and it's just a big mess kind of a thing. Like, that's what the world feels like right now in a nutshell.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's like, use some common sense and have some education around what we're talking about today, and that'll get you pretty far, you know?
I
So,
mean, we used
yeah.
to be a high trust society where we could, trust the FBI. The FBI was always the go-to as far as this stuff goes.
Hmm.
And when even the FBI is getting caught cooking the books, it really makes you question everything else you're being
Hmm.
told as far as that stuff goes. Again, I really like John Lott stuff because he actually worked uh, for the FBI, crunching numbers as far as that stuff goes. So
Hmm.
he knows how they hide the bodies. And I think he's the Crime Policy Research Center. He's always a good spot to check in with when it comes to what are the crime trends actually doing.
Yeah.
That's what's bizarre right now is the FBI numbers are showing a decline in crime, while the actual Bureau of Justice Statistics is actually showing an increase for the last 2 years, and we literally don't have any idea what's going on.
Hmm. Wow. And I forgot to tell everybody at the beginning of the show that we're kind of going to go over some of the highlights of the crimes. I think you called it Crimes and Criminals presentation that you did. I can't remember. Was it a couple of months ago?
It
That
was in
was fun.
January. It was
It was in
originally
January.
scheduled for December, but the world tried to take me out, so I had to
Yeah.
do it in January.
And you still probably shouldn't have been there that night. You were in pretty bad shape.
That was a rough presentation as far as that stuff goes. I
Yeah.
was listening to it earlier today in preparation for this, and I'm like, dude, that's just you were. I'm not sure if I was on death's door, but I was certainly not a beacon of health. Let's just put it that way.
I, for one, felt pretty bad for you, but then also that was your choice to show up in that
Yes.
condition. So, it is what it is. I'm glad you lived through it. So anyway, the Crimes and Criminals presentation had some highlights that I wanted to go over with John tonight, just to make sure that all of you guys know this information as well. There was so much. He presented so much, and it is not very expensive at all to go to this. He does it, I think, once a year, and it's just a really, really valuable thing. I mean, I really think that you should be following John if you aren't already. And we're gonna, towards the end of the show, we'll talk about where you can go to find him. So the next thing I wanted to talk about and hone in on a little bit is about how criminals actually choose targets. And this is something that I've always been fascinated with. Human behavior in general is something I'm fascinated with. But based on your research and experience, what do most responsible, well-intentioned people misunderstand about how criminals actually select their targets? And then what signals someone to look easier to victimize based on what you know?
So, from the academic perspective, we've got research going back to 1981 on how criminals pick their victims. And if I just had to sum this up in one sentence, in a nutshell, it's how fitly you walk. Um,
Yeah,
what
that
criminals
was
are
the
looking,
thing I couldn't believe.
yeah,
Yeah.
criminals are going to have to make critical decisions on very little information. We call that
Mhm.
process thin slicing. So, a lot of what criminals are looking for is someone who is not going to be capable of resisting or running away. And the quick hack for that is just how fitly you walk. They've correlated a lot of walking behaviors with the likelihood of being picked for crime. They've
Mhm.
done that with criminals and just ordinary people as far as that goes. And it really is amazing how much agreement there is on who they would victimize, but also how quickly those decisions tend to be made in like 1.5 seconds.
Yeah.
So, this is where I always tend to get in trouble because we have to talk sex differences as far as that goes. Some of the data varies a little bit for men and women. For men, being larger and appearing to be stronger seems to have some benefit, right? Um, Most criminals don't seem that concerned about the violent resistance that a female could offer them as far as that goes. Probably because they haven't experienced armed females as far as that stuff goes. That's just part of the reality. We also have a little bit of data out there that, for instance, the clothing that a woman wears in public can either relay a certain vulnerability or resistance to crime as far as that goes. Again, those things are simple if you think about it. They're basically
Mhm.
how well could you fight or how well could you run away. So, for
Mhm.
instance, flat shoes versus high heels. Somebody
Yeah.
wearing flat shoes can run or kick a
Yeah.
lot better than somebody in high heels.
Yeah.
So, the criminals are going to make these decisions off very, very little information. So, all you have to do is introduce a little doubt into whether you're the good person. So, it's a there's two
A
sides to
good
this. The
person
first,
to victimize, not a good
yeah,
person
a
morally.
good person to victimize. So the other thing that, yeah, you have to remember is we don't want to appear to be too high reward, right? So
Yeah.
my dear friend William April, when he interviewed a lot more bad guys than I ever did, but he would talk about criminals that hung out at the mall and all they cared about was the white bag. You know what the white bag is?
I don't know, is it an expensive bag?
It's the bag from the Apple store. Okay.
Oh.
So if you walked out with that bag from the Apple store, there was something probably worth about $1,000, if not more, in that bag. So
Mhm.
just little things like that that most of us don't think about. Little
Mhm.
decisions like that are going to be what triggers criminals. He related that, you might walk out of the mall with that white bag, hop in your car, and that's how you end up the victim of a follow home robbery. That crew of guys may just follow you home. unless of course you go into a gated community. That tended to stop them as far as that goes. So they're looking for these little signals that show that you would be an easier person to victimize, and that the risk they're going to have to take to victimize with you carries with it some potential reward as far as that goes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, easy targets. And it makes sense because even when I think about this from an animal kingdom standpoint, of course, anybody or anything, any animal scouting out another animal, a herd of animals, which is what the public space is, right?
Yeah.
They're going to look for the easiest
Yeah.
one. Why wouldn't they, right?
Yeah. The lion is not going to chase the Hussein Bolt of the gazelle world with his
Right.
shoes, tied and ready to run. They're going to be looking for the limping gazelle.
Right.
So a lot of, you talk about mitigating your risks and stuff like that, is to remember that you're always a producer of information. You just need to be
Mm-hmm.
thinking about what information you're pushing into the environment. Again,
Mm-hmm.
we're not describing what ought to be, we're describing what is.
Yeah. Very good. And again, I think I said common sense earlier, didn't I? It seems like it should be common sense. Okay, let's see. Let's go. Oh yeah, you touched on this. So a lot of things you were talking about just now had to do with opportunistic crimes of high value. And one of the things that I learned in your presentation was that property crime is actually far more common than we might think, far more common than violent crime. So why do you think that the public still tends to focus on the less likely threat, and what are these people actually looking for, like when they are scouting out a home, and how can we protect against that?
So when it comes to property crime versus violent crime, I just think it goes back to the classic news media idea that if it bleeds, it leads, right?
Oh yeah.
Um, you know, part of the problem is with home burglars and stuff like that is that they are so commonplace, they don't rise above the level of normal to really get
Mm-hmm.
somebody's attention.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that happens, if you're in a large city area, it's going on. You know, most of your burglaries are daytime burglaries. Kick the door in, grab anything of value, and leave. I mean, there's scores of those going on any particular day, and they don't make any particular news. Now, when the violent crime kicks off, where you've got somebody bleeding, whether they're victim of an aggravated assault, whether they've died as a result of their wounds, if it's particularly horrific sexual assault, that sort of thing. That's the kind of stuff that's going to get eyeballs on the screen and bring everybody's attention. And I think it also goes back to the matrix we were talking about earlier about it as far as assessing risk. If somebody kicks in your door while you're not home and ransacks your home, maybe takes a TV from the master bedroom, steals a laptop, that kind of stuff, those items are fairly replaceable. And if you can get over the sense of violation that comes with being the victim of a property crime, you can recover from that pretty quickly. The world is sadly filled with the victims of the so-called aggravated assault, right? We don't charge people with attempted murder anymore. They always get charged with attempted assault. I'm sorry, aggravated assault, which means very well that maybe you're blind in one eye because you caught a pellet out of a shotgun, right? That's a lifelong crippling injury. Maybe I think we try to keep this family. Maybe you're pooping in a colostomy bag for the rest of your life, right? That is a long-term effect that you can't get over as far as that goes. So again,
Mm-hmm.
recovering from the violent crime is also much more difficult for a lot of people. So I mean, it goes back to that risk versus consequences award. As a general rule,
Mm-hmm.
we can buy our stuff back if we have to. We can replace it.
Mm-hmm.
If you've lost a loved one because they're dead, if you've got somebody that's been traumatized, that will be seeing a psychiatric therapist, counselor person for years, that has a much longer consequence as far as that
Mm-hmm.
goes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And
So
you had mentioned about how do we prevent it as well, right? Did you want me to?
yes.
Okay. So here's the ugly reality of property crime. Property crime is very deterrable, right? What you're going to be is one of a many potential targets. So you don't have to have Fort Knox with walls surrounding your house. You just have to look a little more difficult to break into than the next house. So there's no single item or mechanism that you can put into effect that's really going to control your risk as far as that stuff goes, at least as far as being an attempted victim.
Mm-hmm.
Arguably, probably the single most important thing you could do is simply replace all the hardware in your door with much longer screws. It's disturbing how many like front doors in most houses in America you can literally just kick a couple of times and it will come open.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you want to do any single thing, I would say, reinforce your doors, and also just lock your doors and windows. That will go a long time as far as fixing that. Now, once we've taken kind of that low hanging fruit, then everything is just gravy on top, right? So things like, visible cameras. If you've got how you're going through the neighborhood and only a quarter of the houses have cameras, most people are just going to skip over the houses that have the visible cameras as far as that goes. Dogs are kind of a mixed blessing as far as that goes. The way your dog behaves when you're home with them versus how they might behave when there's like somebody breaking in. A lot of times, dogs' aggression comes to them being home with the pack. If you're not there when somebody tries to kick in the door, the dog may not respond in the same way. Other little tips and tricks is don't leave garage door openers out in the driveway. If I want to break into most people's cars, most of the guys will, you'll have a car in the driveway, walk up, hit the garage door opener, go into the garage, close the door behind you, and most people keep their tools in the garage. So go into the garage, use their tools to break into the house. Most people aren't going to have a deadbolt on that door going from the house into the garage. So, put a deadbolt on that. Hurricane film, security film can go a long way to preventing a lot of the common ways. And none of these are by themselves exceptionally expensive. And, it's one of those things, maybe I do one of these things every year and eventually I have a much more secure residence.
What about lighting? Is that a big deal?
Yeah. So there's different philosophies on that. As a general rule, there's a whole field of study called crime prevention through environmental design. And excuse my dehumanizing example, but a lot of the people we're worried about are a lot like cockroaches. When the lights come on, they tend to scurry. So having your area around your house being well lit tends to be a deterrent. And it also makes it easier for people driving past to see that dude that's hiding in the bushes as far as that goes.
Yeah.
Arguably just as important as lighting is making sure you don't have large shrubbery or bushes that would allow somebody to hide as far as that goes. So, all those things, there's no single magic bullet outside of, reinforcing the doors, but all those things taken together tend to serve us pretty well.
And then when we're still on the topic of property crime versus violent crime, I want to make a distinction here legally, because I still think a lot of people think they have a legal right to use lethal force to protect their property. And is there anywhere where that's the case in the United States?
So the only carve out that I'm aware of involves Texas, but there's a bunch of caveats to that. Like I think it has to be at night, and I think it has to be there's like a certain series of crimes like arson and some other things that would allow you to do that. It happens very intermittently because we as a society, rightly or wrongly, have decided there's nothing worth shooting people over on the property front. We can debate whether that is actually a sound long-term decision or not. But outside of Texas, I'm not aware of any areas that would allow you to use deadly force to protect property. Now, that's a fundamental difference than you're home and somebody kicks in your front door while you're there. That kind of home invasion situation. There's very few places in the country where that's not going to trigger the castle doctrine, and you're going to be allowed to use deadly force to defend somebody from, forcibly entering your house. Again, be smart. That could be a drunken neighbor's kid as far as that goes. So don't just shoot somebody because they come into your house. But if somebody comes to your door wearing a mask, that's a pretty obvious tell. Or what this is 2026. So somebody kicks your front door and then they're wearing a hoodie and have a COVID mask. That's probably not the drunk neighbor's son coming in just trying to crash out because he's too drunk.
Yeah. I wanted to just make that distinction because I'm not sure everybody's aware of that. So.
Yeah, and the biggest one is when people leave their house to confront, right?
Right.
There's something magical. A man, English common law, a man's home is his castle. If somebody forcibly enters your house, I think everybody gets that. But if somebody's trying to steal your car, I spend a lot of time in Memphis. I still get a lot of their things. A lot of bad things tend to happen when people go out to confront people over vehicle theft. One of the more interesting ones that happened, I think, last year, this was in the Shelby County area. Dude goes out to confront people. Of course, the bad guys are very well armed and prepared and ready to go. Shots begin to get exchanged, and the homeowner ends up cranking off like a whole high cap mag and hits 3 of his neighbor's house. And he got charged with, I think, 3 counts of reckless endangerment with a firearm because, that he shouldn't have been, arguably shouldn't have been there in the first place. But shooting at, dangerous criminals once they're fleeing the scene is not a good, solid choice either.
Right. Yeah. Good distinction. Thanks for clarifying that. Okay. Let's go into the next question about the criminal justice if do we call it that? Criminal justice system. This one was kind of interesting to me as well. Many people assume that if a serious crime happens, that the system will eventually catch and punish the offender. That's what we all think happens. But based on the data, you say it might not be a realistic belief. Could you frame that up for us so we can understand that better? And where do most people overestimate the system in this regard?
Right. So let's back up. We do not have the word justice has nothing to do with what happens. We have a legal system, right?
Yeah, that's
Justice
why I said that.
is an occasional happy coincidence of the system when it tends
Mhm,
to work well. So we
mhm,
tend to think as good law-abiding people that if people violate the social contract, there will be consequences to that. Okay. That assumes that the police are going to be able to identify the perpetrator, charge that person. The prosecutor is going to carry through with charges, and that person will end up typically incarcerated in the prison. That's what we think is going to happen. So let's work through that chain. Um, Violent crime clearance rates are pretty abysmal, and property crimes are even worse. So I'm sorry, I'm side-eyeing here some of the slide deck.
How dare you, John?
Yeah, uh, I don't have all these memorized, right?
Really? I'm shocked.
The best data we have, clearance rates for 2024, property crime cleared at 15.9% of the time, right? And clearance is very, very optimistic. Clearance isn't just somebody was arrested and prosecuted; it's just that somebody was arrested and charged and turned over for prosecution. There are a ton of pretrial diversion programs now. So maybe some dude, he's done the crime 12 times before. He gets caught burglarizing your house. There's a strong probability that if that's the only, he doesn't have anything on his record, that guy's going to get some kind of pretrial diversion or, conviction and, promise to behave, home arrest, that sort of thing. So only 1 in 6 of your property crimes are actually going to be cleared.
Mm,
The clearance rate for a violent crime is not that much more faith engaging. So overall, violent crime, murder, rape, robbery, the serious violent crimes are only cleared at about 42.7% of the time, right?
wow.
And that again includes things like just being arrested and charged, not that this person actually saw a prison. We've been getting a little bit better. The best data we have, like for 2021, was an abysmal year for the legal system. Murder was cleared at like 47.8% of the time. In other words, more than half the people that committed a murder in this country this year skated on that. Some
Wow.
areas of the country, it's even worse. Chicago, at one point, were only making arrests in 20% of their fatal shootings as far as that stuff goes. So the police are under
This is
resourced,
not what I want to hear,
understaffed.
John. This is not what
Say
I
what?
want to hear. This is not
Yeah.
what I want to hear.
This is not the good news episode, right? As far as
Mm-mm,
this stuff goes, this
mm-mm.
may be the good time to stick your head in the sand and go la 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 la. As far as this stuff goes, right?
If you've been listening to Defenders Live and something in you knows it's time to go deeper, not just in your training, but in your life, become a paid subscriber of Defenders Live. Each month, we meet for a live group call, having real conversations about physical growth, emotional discipline, and spiritual strength. You'll be part of a growing community of people just like you, committed to becoming true defenders of life and of their families. This isn't about being perfect, it's about showing up, doing the work, and not doing it alone. So go to defenders-live.com and become a paid subscriber and take your next step toward becoming the kind of defender this world desperately needs.
But just things, rape has never been cleared at better than a 30% rate in
Are
recent
you
memory.
serious?
Yeah.
Wow.
The peak rape clearance I have is in 2020 at 30.6%. And again, 2021, horrible year for the system. It dropped down to 21%. Again, some of this stuff is starting to trend upwards. But you have to remember, we've had a large change in the prosecutor's office in a lot of our most problematic cities. Multiple, not just one city, multiple cities announcing they're not going to charge people for certain crimes. The one that immediately pops to mind is, we're not going to charge people with resisting arrest in New York City anymore, period. Um, uh, that's a fairly significant event from the standpoint of the cops having faith in the system, right? So when you combine that with the police not clearing the cases very well, right, abysmal clearance rates, and you combine that with a criminal justice system that views the how do I say that views the miscreant as a victim of our evil capitalist society, you get some bizarre results when it comes to that. People think that if you're found guilty in court, you will end up of a felony in court. But we know the best data we have is that of people convicted in a state court for a felony, not a misdemeanor, but a felony, only about 40% of them will actually physically be sent to a prison. They're going to do some kind of home release, going to do some kind of probation or parole as far as that goes. So there's a lot of violent offenders out there walking the streets as far as this goes. The criminal justice system, when we do incarcerate people, the good news is one of the few things that I like statistics wise that I pulled out this year is I had some data that I had historically used on length of sentences as far as that stuff goes. And what seems to have happened is we've gotten better about putting people who actually commit homicide and rape in prison and keeping them there for longer. The problem is crimes like robbery and kidnapping now have actually shorter prison sentences than they would have in, let's say, 1992, as far as that goes. One of the things that people don't understand is that we're sold this myth that there's a ton of people in our prisons are just filled with people who are there for very low level drug offenses. And that has never, ever, ever been true. The reality is that we have a hardcore section of people serving, I think it's more than half the state prison population is there for violent crimes. When people talk about people serving crimes just for drugs, they're talking about somebody who might have gotten their most recent charge was some kind of a drug charge, but they've got 2 priors for aggravated assault. Well, obviously the system is going to treat them different, which will typically see people that are in prison for drugs. You have to remember is everything gets plea bargained nowadays. So if somebody is in prison for drug possession, what that means realistically is they got caught distributing drugs, right? And they were offered a plea deal. Okay, so here's the story. You're not going to plead guilty to possession with intention to distribute. You're going to plead guilty to simple possession, and we'll give you 3 years. And anybody would take that deal as far as that goes. You don't want the possession with intent because the next time you go to sell drugs, it's going to tend to get you there in jail. The other things people tend to discount about, just drug people as far as stuff like that goes, is criminals aren't very specific. They tend to be very generalist. So the dude that's breaking into your car today could be selling drugs. Baltimore City did a very famous study where they looked at everybody that had been arrested for murder in the past year and found that about 70% of them had some kind of prior drug offense as far as that goes. So, the myth of the non-violent drug offender is, largely that is just a myth. Our prisons are holding lots of dangerous people. So anytime people talk about criminal justice reform, all the low-hanging fruit, the dude that was only there for possession of drugs was never in prison to begin with. But all those people, if there were any doubt, got kicked loose during COVID as far as that stuff goes. So when people talk about we've got to empty our prisons, what they're saying is the people that have a known history of rape and murder and robbery and kidnapping, we need to turn those people loose and have them serve less time. Say what you will, prisons don't do much well, and I think we've almost all given up on our prisons rehabilitating people, but they do seem to incapacitate people. It's very hard to commit the murder, rape, robbery of decent people if you're in a environment that's not filled with decent people.
But didn't you just say only 30% of cases actually find the person and prosecute them anyway?
Yeah, it's a ridiculously small amount. Again,
so that makes me think that the people that are ending up in the cages, so to speak, or in the prison behind bars are the less smart ones. So the really, really good, smart criminals that are probably more what we should be worried about, even more so, they don't ever.
Well,
I'm using my logic here and seeing.
That's always been the joke in law enforcement, is that we only catch the stupid ones.
That is a joke in law enforcement?
Yes, absolutely. We only catch the stupid ones, right?
So that's kind of where I was going with it, but I didn't want to say it like that.
Absolutely. You have to work really hard to end up in prison. One of my favorite social comedy trainers is Heather McDonald, and she famously said, prison remains a lifetime achievement award for persistence in criminal offending. Number one, we know that when somebody finally gets arrested for a burglary or something like that, they've committed that crime, I think on average about 12 times before they actually got caught. Yeah, that 12-to-1 ratio pops up in the literature a lot as far as that goes. What we have is a small number of hyper-violent people that tend to cause all of our problems. There's some birth cohort research from not just the United States, but you look at other Western nations, there's just a small percentage of the population who doesn't care and takes certain degrees of joy in raping and murdering and killing other people.
And those are not the ones that you're finding and putting behind bars, is my point. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you want to talk, my favorite example, there's a bunch of examples, but the one that pops to mind, a couple of years ago, she was a pre-K teacher in the Memphis area, daughter of a fairly well-moneyed, one of those like not Vanderbilt-esque families. And she was out jogging in a good part of Memphis and she was abducted, clearly with the intention of raping her. She apparently violently resisted. He basically beat her to death. Everybody focuses on the horrible crime, but the dude that did that to her had been in prison for the last 20, he was had served 20 years of a 24-year sentence. He had gotten sent to prison when he was 16.
Wow.
In order to get to be sent to prison when you're 16, you have to be a genuinely bad person. He had been in juvie 16 times before. He's a problem throughout the entire system. And what is the great travesty is all these untested sexual assault kits, right? So whenever there's a victim of a sexual assault, the police will do an evidence collection. You get pretty good ability to identify witnesses. To identify perpetrators. In Eliza Fletcher's case, the dude had been out for about a year. As soon as he got out of prison, he had kidnapped and raped a woman. And then the police department set on that untested sexual assault kit. It never got ran through forensics. Had they run that, sexual assault kit, as soon as it happened, they would have gone, oh, that's Cleotha. Let's go pick him up. So, this was a person that the criminal justice system should have just kept in prison. But even when he was let out of prison, the police department did not do their due diligence in testing the sexual assault kit and identifying him as a suspect. I mean, he should have never been in a position to do what he did the second time that he was post-release.
There's so many things that aren't going well right now. Question, do you want to go down the side street of the recent abduction of the Samantha Guthrie's mom? It's Savannah Guthrie? I don't remember.
Yeah. So here's the thing is that I know a little bit about a small number of things, and I don't feel like I can credibly comment on that one. I mean, it seems kind of atypical, right?
Yeah, very atypical.
As far as that goes. If I had to just idly speculate, I think somebody kidnapped the wrong person and they will eventually recover her body, as far as that stuff goes. It's just that's a tough one to work with. You talk about misunderstandings. What people don't appreciate is how much cartel and drug-related crime takes place along the border. The number, I want to say Phoenix is still the number one place for kidnappings with the FBI. And these are all, cartel family members who are living in the States that get kidnapped by another cartel. And it's a straight up ransom as far as that goes. I wrote a review of a book about this dude. He was funny. He'd always wanted to be an FBI agent. He'd come from an IT background. So he thought that he would do some kind of computer crime, and he got put on the violent crime task force in San Diego. And after about 2 years, he decided he didn't want to play that game and eventually retired. But, his conclusion at the end of that thing was, thank God there's a wall. Let's build it taller as far as that goes. So, the news media does its best to keep us oblivious to all the terrible things that are happening along the border. I mean, just personal detail for me. I graduated from FLETC in June of 2002, and one of my FLETC classmates was murdered on August 9th of 2002 by cartel hitmen that had fled into the country. I mean, there's this horrendous amount of, historically, there's been this tremendous amount of violence associated with the border. And I don't know what's happened in the last year, but all that seems to have come to a grinding halt. I'm sure that the current administration has nothing to do with that, but it is what it is when it comes to these realities.
Yeah. That reminds me of, have you ever heard the Juan Rivas story? I had him on my show. He had a similar thing happen to, not being abducted, but he was shot by a guy. And that's what they think happened with him too, that the guy thought he was someone else, or he was at the wrong house, basically, sort of a thing. So they don't know for sure if that's what it was, but it was the same kind of a deal. So yeah, who knows? I just thought I'd throw that out there and see what you had to say.
Yeah, we'll have to wait to see what comes from that one. Like I said, I don't know enough about that. That was never what I did as far as that stuff goes to really offer anything intelligent outside of kind of the obvious stuff that everybody's already seen.
You're not offering anything intelligent? Come on, John.
There's a caveat that I was outside of my lane. So
Yeah, I understand that. You're good at staying in your lane. You know your stuff. Okay, let's kind of wrap up with, I want to just like, first of all, soaking all that information in, it can be very uninspiring in many ways. And so I think I want to try to leave the show on a good note, so to speak, not as in good news, but as in, this is just another reason why I believe personal responsibility is so imperative. And the more good information and education you can get yourself, the better you're going to be. And so I think what I'd like to do is leave the audience with some, the best use of their time and energy as far as how they can um, have the best personal safety in their day-to-day lives. Like, what are the things, the highest leverage things they should be focusing on when it comes to personal safety? And I'm going to lead it off with something that I guess, I don't know if triggered's the word, that's like a popular word nowadays, by on the internet. I just keep seeing this over and over again, and I feel like we just need to keep shouting from the rooftops that your car is not a holster. John, why is your car, why should it not be a holster? Why is it not a good idea?
So there's practical reasons and there's tactical reasons for this. The practical reason is that most crime guns, and I was going to shock your audience, crime guns don't come from retail gun sales. They don't come from gun show gun sales. Almost all crime guns are enter that criminal world from theft. Depending, I can't remember the figure off the top of my head, but I want to say, there were 1,500 guns stolen out of vehicles in the Memphis area. They tend to be pretty consistent with that. So, the problem with the gun in your car is multiple. Number one, it is not easy to properly secure it. There's all these kinds of weird in the car holsters that are designed to do things. I got news for you. If somebody's trying to carjack you, pulling a gun on a drawn gun is probably less than an optimal solution to begin with. So if you think you're going to have some cool magnetic holster that you're going to shoot your way out of the problem, as a practical matter, it doesn't work. I want to say the guys from Filster have done some testing where they actually put the various solutions in a vehicle and tried them. They don't keep the guns stable when the car crashes. As a tactical matter, you don't want to try to fight that drawn gun problem. The other thing to consider is, and I would say this, is that having some way to properly secure a gun in your car is probably of great value. There may be places in your daily business, stuff like that, where you may not be allowed to carry a gun and you get to physically go to the Social Security office. So the thing that having a way to safely secure a gun in your car does for you is you can carry to the Social Security office, completely and safely lock up your gun so that it cannot be readily stolen, go into the Social Security office, conduct your business, and then gun back up when you come out. What a lot of people will do is, because they know they're going to a total non-permissive areas, they won't carry a gun at all in that situation. Again, I don't care what people tell you to do. I'll tell you what I do. I have one of the console vault systems for my truck. I actually had to swap out the front seats and the console to get that thing in there. I hesitate to say it changes your life, but whether it's prescription meds or just guns, having a way to securely lock up a gun in your vehicle is hugely invaluable. I have zero expectations I would access that gun and use it to defend myself. It's a way to store the gun safely. So your point is very, very well taken. The car is not a holster. If you think your car is a holster, you're either not serious about this or you don't have a holster that allows you to comfortably carry the gun on a daily basis. The best place for the gun to be is on your person. You're never going to know when you need your gun. You will be informed when you need your gun at the last possible moment. You're not going to get a reservation that says, "Hey, meet me at the corner of Walk and Don't Walk at 3:00 this afternoon and bring your gun." That never happens. So again, the best place for the gun to be is physically on your person, and you can't leave unsecured guns in vehicles because they're so likely to end up as crime guns. We had this experience. It was interesting. We had a bunch of us up in Nashville for a Range Master event, and one of the students there watched a crew of people go through the parking lot. Like literally, I want to say it was like a Dodge Charger that pulled up. They had somebody, I believe, armed, standing security, watching what was going on. As a crew goes through the cars, I'm sure they're looking for, gun stickers and stuff like that. They stole like 20 some guns out of the parking lot. He called 911. The police never showed up. So we kind of have this great, rolling cascade of everything that's wrong with this country as far as these issues going on here. Just the fact that the criminals could operate with such immunity and confidence that nobody official was going to try to interfere with what they were doing I think it is particularly telling.
Again, things I don't want to hear, but thank you for telling me. It's so true though. And whenever I do talk to people and they say, "Oh yeah, I carry a gun. I throw one in my glove box, when I head down the road or something like that." It just, there's something inside of me that just, you know what I mean? And I think it's that it's the idea of, and there are some people that have that kind of frame of mind even when they're carrying the gun on their person, which is, I'm good, I got a gun. Like that's not good. You're not good. You know what I
It's
mean?
not a lucky rabbit's foot. That's what a lot of people treat the gun as. It's just a talisman that's going to ward off evil.
Right.
The
Yeah.
gun doesn't do anything. The operator has to do something.
Yeah. It's I don't know. It's hard to watch. It's hard to be around. And especially if someone's advocating for that too, and they don't quite understand what violent crime really looks like, that there is they say there's no timer in a gunfight, but there is a time factor that's very important. And you're not just going to have all the time in the world to figure things out. And so
somebody I respect immensely famously said there may not be any timers at a gunfight, but the Grim Reaper is standing there with a stopwatch, and how fast you need to be is only known by him. So I'm aware of very few instances in which a high level of skill at arms was a detriment to anybody. But we have numerous examples of low skilled people failing miserably because they could not rise to the occasion on that particular day.
Yeah. And you're behind the power curve to begin with, so that you're at a disadvantage if you're the one being targeted and you don't see it coming, and you may not. Or even if you do, you're still usually at a disadvantage time-wise. So anyway, I'll get off my high horse about that. Thank you for reinforcing one of my pet peeves, and helping educate the audience about that. I do want to talk about, or give you the opportunity to talk about, you said you've got some new classes coming up. You're going to be going to California of all places. Is that right?
Yeah. So my road show for my shooting classes, I've always had to, try to keep that within a day's drive of Tupelo, Mississippi, which is actually a lot of the country. Like I just got back from Chicago. I'll be in Florida twice. This year. But I was supposed to be teaching a class for Tom out in Arizona. So I went ahead and booked some classes. I'll be out in the Azusa, California area in April. My Who Wins, Who Loses, Why lecture, I'm trying to get the dates are already set. I think they're April 14th and 15th. I'll run that in the San Diego area on a weeknight. I think it's a Tuesday and a Wednesday evening from 6 to 10. Look for the website to see where those are listed. But I don't know if I ever get out to California again with all my gear. It literally takes an entire pickup to haul that stuff out there. But I will definitely be in Azusa, California in April doing the lecture and the 2-day cognitive pistol. Cognitive pistol is an intermediate to an advanced class. It's not like, hey, I just bought a gun class by any stretch of the imagination. The problem that we have in the world is that, most shooting classes are just shooting faster and faster, occasionally more accurately. And what I strive to do is integrate that decision making into the shooting. So almost every, go, no go will be based on a visual signal as far as that goes. And we'll gradually ramp up the complexity of the decision making to the point that you're actually at the end of the class, we're actually solving real world style problems with the pistol in a way that you just don't get to do in a lot of places. We'll do moving targets, we'll have turning targets, huge aspect of 3-dimensional tactical anatomy incorporated in there as well.
Oh, that sounds like so much fun.
It's that's why it's like, I make it sound like a very serious class, but dude, everybody giggles in that class.
Yeah.
And the other thing everybody worries about is like, well, I don't know if I'm physically can stand up to that. And it's like, dude, this is a mental class. It's not a physical class. There are no squat rolls. There are no sprints. There are no push-ups.
We could add it though. You could add it at any point.
That would not be appreciated by most people. But again, the most common feedback I get is
I'm an oddball then. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. The most common feedback I get is I have not been this mentally challenged in a class since I took a force on force class. So again, shooting with the decision making incorporated into it, I think is a big hole that we're missing, and I'm
Yeah.
trying, myself and some other folks are trying to fill right now.
I'm really, really glad that you're filling that gap because I felt that way for a long time. And that is, I mean, the decisional making process is one of the most important things. So for those of you listening and not watching, you can go to twopillarstraining.com, and two is spelled out TWO, twopillarstraining.com to go check out where John's going to be. I'm telling you guys, of all the things that John shared with us tonight, it was the teeniest, tiniest sliver of his brain. There is so much more. And anytime you get a chance to learn from John, you should, and it'll probably be fun. Every time I have him on the show, it's fun. I don't know how you can make such bad news kind of sort of fun to, I don't know. The deliverer of the message is important sometimes too, we might as well learn this information, whether we like it or we don't, but be able to retain it from a guy who's fun to listen to and really cares about getting this information out to the general public. And I just can't tell you how much I appreciate that, because this is really important stuff that people need to know.
And on top of that, my humility is what really makes me stand out for everybody.
So inside joke, I told him that his friend Lee Weems was finally on the show after being on air for 4 years now. I finally get Lee Weems on, and ended up not being back to back, but close. And I can see why they're good friends now. They have this similar sense of humor. So you guys are just two peas in a pod, aren't you?
Yes, well, we literally put on an event together. Myself, Lee, and Eric Gelhaus. We offer the Cognitive Conclave in Red Hill, Georgia, every year. So yeah, it's like our excuse to hang out and have the students pay for everybody's travel to get there.
It is funny that you called your tour this year. You called it the Road Show. I think that's funny.
Yeah, well, dude, it's again, not trying to shamelessly plug, but if you take Cognitive Pistol, you're like, holy crap! There's costume changes, there's singing, there's props,
What?
there's rearranging the stage. Yeah.
Really? Is there
Yeah.
video of any of this anywhere that I can watch? Is it on YouTube?
There are occasional pictures as far as that stuff goes. Now, full disclosure, one of the things that drives me crazy is people dawdling, getting to the line like, "Hey, everybody else is ready to go. Why aren't you?"
Yeah.
So I will typically poorly sing some Frank Sinatra and only prompt to stop singing when everybody is back at the line. So I didn't say it was good singing or good costume changes. I just said it happened.
Oh my gosh. That sounds like so much fun. Cool. Well, is there anything you want to leave the audience with besides your website? Seriously, guys, you should go check John out. If you've not heard of John yet, where have you been, for one? But for two, you should definitely check out everything he has to offer. There's nothing that he does that is not absolutely valuable. What do you want to leave him with tonight, John?
You know, how is it? Let me back. I am not a rah get a gun person, right? I don't think that the gun is the solution for everybody out there. Now, if you've reached the point where you've carefully thought about whether you can, do violence to another person, that's great. The gun may be a solution. But again, just a little situational awareness. If you know who's around you and what they're doing, that solves a lot of the problem. If you have a can of OC spray and a bright flashlight, again, you solved a huge part of the problem. What you have to do is accept that evil exists in this world, and the societal mechanisms that we've been told that we can rely on to protect us from that evil are very poor to non-existent. And you need to conform your actions to the world as it is, not as you wish it was.
That is beautifully, beautifully said. Absolutely. I can't think of a better way to end the show. I could have you on every 6 months till the end of time, and we still wouldn't get to the end of all the information that you presented at that presentation. That was insanely amount of information. I couldn't believe it.
Well, I'll just throw this out here. I'm just throwing it on the top of my head. I don't know if I can. What I can do is, I know this will be a little before this airs. If anybody has heard me talk about this presentation, I can make sure there's a link on the website. The seminar's recorded. I had some post-event sales as far as that stuff goes. So if any of your listeners are intrigued enough, I will try to make sure. I'm sure it's going to be a couple of days before this post. If you go to twopillarstraining.com, I will make sure. I can't tell you which section it's going to be under yet, but I will try to put it either right there on the front page or someplace where you can find it very easily, where you can get access to to the webinar as far as that stuff goes.
Yeah,
'Cause
and
again, we've only
you
touched
don't
on a few
overcharge
points.
people.
Yeah.
In fact, I think you undercharge, John. But
Yeah.
anyway, it's very reasonably priced, and for what you get, oh my goodness, yeah, highly recommend it.
Yeah, just you get the plague edition of the seminar this year. It was rough, dude. It really was.
Yeah, I was so glad that you had some help while you were there. That was
Yes.
really nice of Tiffany. She's a very good hostess. So awesome. All right. Well, thank you again for coming on the show. I hope I get to see you again soon, John.
All right, sounds great. Just send me the invite.